everyone! So this is the design portion of my final project. I essentially just took a bunch of scrap pieces of fabric that I already had available to me and sewed them together to make a patchwork quilted t-shirt. The materials I used were sewing pins, scissors, measuring tape, the pieces of fabric I had, my sewing machine, and a hot iron. In these clips, I'm just showing you the scrap pieces of fabric that I'll be cutting and sewing together in order to make the t-shirt. This white cotton curtain fabric I'll be tie-dyeing and then cutting after. In these clips, I'm just measuring out the width and length of each piece of fabric that I want, and then I'll be cutting and pinning it together. These next few clips are the tie-dyeing process of that white cotton curtain fabric that I showed you. Here I'm just mixing the dyeing salt in hot water and then mixing it together, soaking the fabric and wringing it out. Now I'm just taking the small elastics that were provided to me in the kit and tying small little bulbs that I'll be dyeing to create different patterns. So the tie-dye kit that I already had was a jewel tone colored kit, and they provide two colors. One was a burnt orange and one was a darker brown, and I used one as a highlight and one just kind of for the rest of the fabric. After tying and dyeing the little bulbs that I created, I wanted to try a different pattern effect. So I took a sponge that I had to try and create a stone wash or an acid wash effect. At first, I put too much dye on the sponge and used too much pressure when applying it to the fabric, which created kind of this like splotchy look. So then I tried again with a lighter touch and it turned out a little bit better. In these next few clips, I'm basically just lining up the pieces of fabric that you saw me cut earlier on in the video and pinning them to prepare them for sewing. Here, I'm just ironing out some of the pieces that I cut from earlier on in the video that maybe were a little wrinkled or had curls to them, just to make it easier to pin and then sew them together. So here's the completed tie-dyed fabric after I washed it. I'm really happy with how it turned out, and I'm just cutting them into pieces and then ironing them out. So here's when we get to the sewing portion of the video. I'm really just sewing the pieces that I'd already pinned together from earlier in the video. After ironing the edges out on the back of the fabric and then pinning the sewed pieces together, I'm just doing more sewing to create a larger piece of fabric that I can essentially cut my pattern from. Here, I'm just laying out the pieces of fabric on top of a t-shirt that I already had just to get an idea of the size that I wanted. Now I'm just ironing all of the extra edges on the back of the fabric just to clean everything up. Here's just more sewing of the patches together on the machine. So instead of creating fabric for the back and front of the t-shirt, I decided to take a sweater that I already had and use the back and the sleeves of it and then just sew the fabric that I created for the front of the t-shirt. Here, I'm just pinning it inside out to see how it would look once I turned it right side out. Then I just sewed those pieces together to the base of the shirt. And then hand stitched the rest of the fabric to the inner cuffs of the sleeves. I forgot to film this part, but I also used the sewing machine to sew the fabric to the shoulders of the sleeves, and then I just cut the neck hole myself with scissors. And here's the final product. I'm honestly so happy with how it turned out. I've never sewed a garment in my life before, And even though I did use half of another t-shirt, I'm still really proud of myself for creating this. Thank you for watching!